Hello world, Patricia O'Connor and Frida Reba Darcy here. Today on the bonsai balcony we have another stellar, look at that, boom, boom, blue sky. Breezy spring Alameda day, everything is continuing to flush out. A couple of little quick observations before I get on to our point of call. Like yesterday, I could show just how much all of this stuff is flushing out, but today I was noticing something different. Out of all these little buds, this guy looked a little, whatever that is, looks a little different. I don't know if you can see it, but then I started looking and there's more. There's another one. There's another one. And where are those sprigs, top and left and right? Those, I believe, are going to be little cypress balls. And they're only on this tree. They're on both halves of that tree, but they're on both halves, both towers of that tree. But yeah, I think those are cypress balls. There's one, that was the first one I noticed, and then I noticed about 8 more between the two tops. And they are slightly, at first I thought, no, that's just a different stage of when they're coming out, but no, they come out different. They come out looking like little spiked nodules on a cone, which is how they start. Anyway, this is how our little ball cypresses look. Today's show, again, this sky, and we are the bonsai balcony, and it is spring day. It is February 2nd. Our pine trees are responding. Our oak trees are responding. Our first green starting to appear on the dawn redwood. So everything across the board, from my maples to my pines, they're all switched on. Even those things that are evergreens and don't look that much different, they look different. The amount of water I'm hauling to and from these guys is different. That tells me everybody is awake and doing their thing. But today we're going to talk about roots. This is a conversation that's not going to be too involved. It's not going to be too deep, but it is also very, very important. And this would have saved me time and money, and that makes this a valuable lesson that I learned. And it's gonna I'm gonna file this under my bald cypress trees in future videos, for the reason that when I decided to make this trio of this compilation, I knew I was going to do 3 bald cypress trees originally, and they were going to be 2, the center one, and one other one of about the size of the trees that you see, plus a much smaller one. And nature threw a little curve that ended up being a good thing in the long run. I ended up getting an extra big tree out of the deal, and that's what led to this trio, and I'm pretty happy with the way that turned out. It was a little happy little accident. But I wanted the best of everything, and whenever I was doing this, I was on a tear of watching videos, as I still am. I still watch a great deal of bonsai videos, ever and always learning. I think I will be a student of bonsai always. I don't think I'll ever go to Japan for study. I would never say never when it comes to travel, but I don't think I see me going and doing that apprenticeship thing in Japan for years, the way those people who have worked so hard and have earned that. I think at my age I would be a little reluctant to give up 6 years that way. But when push comes to shove, I get my education from other sources. And everybody was always in my early sources. I was learning a lot about maples because I had a maple early on. I was learning a lot about wisterias because I didn't have a lot of pines early on. They intimidated me. Because I thought they were like the cool kids, right? Same with oaks. I was reading everything I could about this, and everybody was you hear these things about ramification, and you want to build taper, and you want to build ramification, and when your maples are no longer in leaf, you want to be able to show all that intricate ramification that you made. And in order to get fine ramification, you're told to make fine roots. And nobody ever says anything about building anything other that I ever saw about building anything other than fine roots. To that end, I filled this very, very large pre-bonsai mica container with Akadama. It had some dressing on the top, but from the bottom almost all the way to the top, except just a little bit needed to dress out, that was all pure Akadama, because we were going to do what we had been told early on, and we were going to make fine roots. If we look down here at the top, we're not going to see a lot of fine roots up here at the top, because these are the roots that have been allowed to grow in the moss and stuff, right? And what they're doing is they're making big roots. You can see big roots. But down in there, where all that Akadami is, those roots are just trying to find those little holes and are way finer than they need to be. While on the top, I could, if this were a lot of other bonsai videos, go through here and start cutting a lot of this stuff off the top, because these are big, fat, heavy roots, and on a lot of bonsai videos we see people going through and dressing the top, and so that's kind of misleading in a way. That's misleading. If we're in a building stage with our trees, we are building thickening things to become, to give us taper in places, that's going to require a lot of rollover. I jokingly refer to that as we've got a lot of lumber to make here. We have a lot of lumber to make here to turn this into that, and to turn those into round things. And we probably got to go back in with our tools one or two more times on all of these to make sure that their growth and their rollover is going in a direction that we like. Now, all of that heavy lumber making, as I call it, is best done with big roots, not fine roots. What fine roots do is what people are always telling you to get fine roots for. Fine ramification. As in this tree plus a half a dozen years of somebody who really knows what they're doing, and we would begin to see fine ramification. All of those twigs would just get smaller and smaller and finer, and there'd be more and more of them, and that would become more and more impressive on this tree. And in order to get that on this trident maple, we would hope that down below our Akadama is making us very, very, very fine roots. This tree percolates fine, so I have no need to go doing anything about that. I could weed it, but that's a different story. So that is kind of the rule of thumb there. On this tree, that's not a bad idea. But as we're saying on the other front too, we're also needing to make lumber on this guy, because we've got a lot of rollover to do, and that wouldn't necessarily be what fine roots are going to facilitate. Fat, chunky, clunky, heavy roots facilitate storage of resources. And when we're building things like this, thicker roots build thicker parts, finer roots build finer parts. Had this been an eighth to a quarter granules, the larger size of the granules, and then on top of that, been probably Boon mix, because I was going to water the tree every day anyway. It didn't need to be the water retentive capabilities of pure Akadama. So that is an example where I wasted a lot of money on a product that could have been a third of what was in there, and then those products, and then that third, in other words, instead of being pure Akadama, that could have been a third Akadama, a third lava, and a third pumice. That would have been a better, and then in larger chunks than what I got that in, and that would have made this transformation that I'm doing would go faster. That's one thing right off the bat whenever I started making this compilation that I did wrong, because most of the videos that I was watching at the time, they were talking about refined trees, and I'm looking at bald cypress that have a few years to go before we even start thinking about refinement. So yeah, that was one thing. I could have made that been like something larger, something chunkier, something that facilitates more oxygen, would also facilitate more root growth, but then it would just be bigger chunks and stuff, and promote bigger roots. When it comes time for finer roots, that's after we've got through building all of our major pieces in place. So that is the lesson about why, whenever I would have done this to begin with, I probably should not have gone with something that is more of a finished product substrate. It's just a way to look at that. Another thing about that, I guess, when it comes to the cypress trees, those bigger roots that we see on the top, those are more facilitated by the moss that comes and goes. But at the same time, they're going to help us. This big root is what's coming off the bottom here, and we need this rollover. I'm looking forward to this rollover that makes sure that I don't have to worry about this piece rotting away. So this major root is comes right off the bottom here. So that's facilitating stuff. But all of that fat stuff, I would suspect would probably start disappearing a little bit as we get down to the bottom, away from the top where all of this. But if we ever wanted, and I don't, but if we ever wanted cypress knees, they would come from this stuff. They wouldn't be coming from the fine kind of roots like what you're talking about. You know, those I don't believe would make cypress knees. And otherwise, cypress knees are also the kind of thing that before they ever got even recognized as cypress knees would be the kind of thing that in most bonsai videos they would tend to cut off. I kind of enjoy the look of seeing cypress knees on some of the bald cypress, but I don't really care to do anything to necessarily facilitate that. I just want mine to look like healthy, clean, maintained specimen formal uprights. That's kind of how I want these guys to come off. So at some point when we transplant this, I'll probably clean up the top quite a bit, get rid of some of that heavy stuff that's showing, or at least we'll manicure the top better. I'm not in any big rush to do that. Right now, I don't see, mostly what I see is moss. That's fine. I could dress this out a little better, but mostly it's just about time to go back in with fertilizer. So I'll be glad. I've got some more BioGold coming up when that gets here. But this is a little ditty about roots. There are times when you want chunky roots, and if you want chunky roots, that's because you're building lumber. And if you're building a lot of lumber, or you're trying to get a lot of taper in your tree, or you're trying to get a lot of branches and stuff and back buds and all that stuff, then necessarily fine roots aren't necessarily the way to go to that. Go with bigger chunks, bigger air in between this, not talking air pockets, but just bigger air spaces in between the chunks when you get to your bigger particle sizes, and that sort of promotes the growth of big roots. Now, when you want fine roots, that's kind of what Akadama is good at. It is what it is really good at. Okay. So a little piece of Akadama has tiny little holes in it, and it soaks up water a little, but the water hits it and goes through, but some of it soaks up in there. And when a root is next to that, it'll send out tiny little microscopic hairs that will find those holes, and they will take advantage of those little droplets of water that are in those microscopic little, and there are always holes in Akadama. If you had a big chunk of Akadama, you would see holes in it. If you zoomed in on those, you would see that there are smaller holes, and if you zoomed in on those, you would see smaller. So that's kind of what happens too. It'll send a little root down there in one of those tiny little holes to catch that last little drop of water and make use of that. And that's also the leading edge of root growth. That's where the most intake happens. So those are the happiest areas of roots that are doing that. And when they go in there and they get fat in that little hole that they've just exploited, they will break that chunk of Akadama in half. And then smaller holes will go on to be exploited from smaller chunks of, and that's how it breaks down. But then that is also how that creates fine roots. So again, I was watching some of my favorite teachers do some of their pine work, and when asked about the chunky roots and their pine, they explained that it is not the same priority to them that it would be the maple people. That you look at that by what you're building. You're building big pieces, or you're getting girth, or you're doing something. Then those big pieces will help you facilitate that. If you've got a tree where you're trying to confine everything in its bonsai pot, then having big heavy roots that do not that store more than they gather. Fine roots gather up all the resources, and the fat roots are kind of like banks for that. So that's kind of, but then when it comes to pines, a big fat heavy chunky root can have fine roots coming right off of it. They don't get to a stage. You can have foundation roots, secondary roots, and tertiary roots, just like you have foundation, secondary, and tertiary structure above. So and it's those tertiary fine roots that are what you want when you want a lot of fine branches on a tree that is already in a finished state. In other words, we've got all of our rollover that we're wanting to take care of is taken care of, and our tree is already growing out, and we just are trying to get finer and finer and finer branches on there. And so that's the differences, and that's the differences in why we use different size particles, and that's the differences in why we treat different trees differently when it comes to root work. In some trees, we definitely want to get rid of all those big old huge chunks of lumber out of the pot, and some trees that's not that big a deal. You just don't automatically do that on your pines. That concludes my little TED talk about roots. The misconception that you're always after fine roots can lead you to pay premium for, in my case, a big tub of the wrong materials. I'm not going to go shoveling that out. It's already been like that for a couple of years, but we could have been farther along, and I won't know. I probably won't ever really figure out how much time I added to the process by doing this, nor do I feel like I'm suffering. But this is helpful information. I did go the extra mile and shell out extra for Akadama for what is now apparently no reason. So that was useful information, and I just wanted to pass that along. Like and subscribe if you guys haven't already. Our next drop will be midweek when, well, I don't know what we're going to do midweek. It'll be something fantastic, though. How could it not be? Look at all this. How could we not have something fantastic to do on my next day off? I appreciate you. Frida appreciates you. And thank you all so much for watching. You know, art is our bond, and we can't forget who we are, and that art is what also brings us all together. Thank you all so much for watching.